control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'm covering a Twilight Zone episode. This is from season 1, episode 15. It is called I Shot an Arrow into the Air. It's written by Rod Serling and actually derived from a story he got sold, I believe, at a party. I think it was a neighbour who had the idea, and it was essentially he bought the idea and then wrote it into his own version. Unfortunately, I can't find the name of the lady who actually came up with the story now. Anyway, yeah, interesting one, this one. And unfortunately, it has a plot that's been reused many times since. However, that doesn't mean that the original episode is derivative in any way. It could be all of the various versions of the story come from this. Essentially, and I will spoil this episode, I think. Essentially, a team of astronauts are stranded somewhere and they're trying to figure out where, but it's in a place that could be, well, they've re-landed on Earth and don't realise that. It's got some interesting stock footage at the beginning of sort of scientists, NASA, I guess, rocket scientists preparing for a launch and a launch happening. And then we see the aftermath of that, and men crashed in this rocket that's been sent up. And they also, when the rocket gets sent up, the telemetry gets lost, so they cannot find where this rocket's gone. Anyway, these guys land. They're in a sort of hot, arid place. They surmise it's an asteroid, which is a bit silly, honestly. Asteroids don't have oxygen atmospheres, do they? But they kind of work out they're kind of orbiting the sun, so it must be somewhere near to Earth. But I figure they're probably not going to get found. Oh, anyway, 8 astronauts took off, and 5 of them are dead. 4 of them are dead. One's badly injured, and there's 2 others. Now, this is a well-acted piece of work. I have to say I quite enjoyed it. The senior officer is played by Edward Binns. His name is Donlin. The story was by Madelon Champion, who is I think a neighbour or a friend of Rod Serling, and directed by Stuart Rosenberg. But as I say, Rod Serling kind of took the premise of the idea and wrote this script. It first aired January 15th, 1960. It's a decent episode. It's kind of memorable. Essentially, these men are sort of struggling to figure out how they're going to survive, but one of them just wants to survive at the expense of the others. Corey is the man. They're basically complains they're giving water to a man who's probably about to die anyway, and why waste it? And like the senior officer says, look, if someone needs something, we're giving it to them. If you needed something, you'd get something. You'd get it too. Would you like us not to deprive you? It's all that kind of argument. And meanwhile, there's this tension about these men stuck in this bare, barren place and getting on. The other 2 men, the poorly man finally dies, and the other 2 men go off and sort of scouting. But only one comes back, Corey, who kind of said he got separated, but it turns out he's got the water of the man who went off with. So the commanding officer is very suspicious and holds him at gunpoint. Anyway, they go wandering off. They find the man in question who's kind of in a poor way, and it kind of escalates to there. Basically, Corey kills them, but not before one man gives them a strange gesture and paints something weird in the sand, like a vertical line with two horizontal lines going near the top, almost like a T, but not quite. And he's trying to figure it out. Anyway, it turns out, I think you may even guess from this description, he's there on Earth, in like the Nevada desert or in the desert. In fact, it was filmed in Death Valley, so it's there. And when he hits a certain point of a brow of a hill, he sees the telegraph poles, which was what the man was trying to draw, and a town and so on. And he's realised he's committed murder, in essence, thinking he was stranded on this asteroid. And, you know, he did it to survive a few more days tops. He committed murder just for that. It seems like quite extreme, but yeah, that's the kind of guy he was, I guess. Now, this story is interesting because Serling wrote it, and you know what? It reminded me of the first part of the original Planet of the Apes film, where the astronauts are stranded somewhere, they don't know where, and they're kind of speculating on things. They're not as horrible to each other as in this story. Well, one of them in this story, but it's kind of got a very similar feel. And of course, Rod Serling wrote the screenplay to Planet of the Apes, and I feel like there was quite a lot of this story in that first part of Planet of the Apes. It was kind of interesting how he recycled it. Now, as I say, this story's been written a lot of times. Apparently, I read that it was actually reused in a comic book story in a very similar vein, just a rework. It was called Breathless, and it was called from a comic book called Web of Horror #2. So, like I say, it's a rework of this story, but the twist at the end is they are in suits and they are frightened of taking the suits off and they run out of air. But in fact, they're on Earth, so if they had taken the helmets off, they wouldn't have died. So it's kind of, a horror twist on this story. I quite enjoyed this one. It's not the most memorable, but it's kind of effective. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's probably pretty gritty for a Twilight Zone as well. You know, we're bordering on quite sort of intense drama, actually. So yes. It's, yeah, I enjoyed this one. I don't think I'm going to say much more than that. It was well acted. I think the story and the dialogue were pretty solid for a Twilight Zone, and Rod Serling turned in a good script here. So yeah, I shot an arrow in the air, and what is it? Where it landed, I know not where. That's kind of what they're talking about here. And of course, I should have said this is detailing what was meant to be for man's first space flight outside the Earth's atmosphere. It's going to be interesting. In fact, the rocket taking off and the telemetry getting lost reminded me of the Quatermass experiment, which was a few years before this. There's kind of a similar vibe in that way too. Okay, I think I'll stop there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to